What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over how to make our bullets and our projectiles go directly where the crosshairs are in our first person shooter tutorial series. So I've shown you a few different methods of aiming and shooting, but one thing that we never quite covered was actually lining up our projectiles directly with the crosshairs. Now this is important because of course we can shoot the bullet or the projectile directly out of our muzzle and we can hit scan, but sometimes we do want to spawn an actual projectile and we do want it to go directly where our crosshairs are. Now, there's actually a very simple way to do this, and we're going to cover it today. Of course, doing this does spawn the projectile a little bit above where the muzzle would be, because we're lining it up perfectly where we want it to come out into the world, as opposed to where we want it to come out directly on the weapon. However, this is easily accounted for. A lot of games will display muzzle flash on the weapon, and then, of course, the projectiles are much smaller in most cases. Of course, if you have rockets or things, they can be larger. And there's a few tricks we can do to actually lead it, basically, out of the muzzle, as far as the player is concerned, without actually having to fire it from the socket of the gun and just launch it from there. So we can actually clean this up really rather nicely and get these bullets to go exactly where we want them to be. See, these bullets are a lot smaller, so it's harder to tell. But we can get them exactly where we want them to be in a very short amount of time, making just a few changes. This works for aiming down sights as well, but we need to hide the crosshairs with all of the changes that we made. So, to get started today, we'll be taking a look at our base weapon BP, and we're going to swap around some logic in there. However, if you have not watched any episode of the series, we're getting kind of far along. This is still very early on in the series as a whole, but far enough in that you may want to check out the other episodes to see how we've got to this point. If you're interested, I will leave this iCard right here in the top right corner. You can check it out and get caught up with all the series, all the episodes in the series we've done so far, and also all the episodes we do after this, to the current one. Otherwise, if you just care about the aiming, I will leave this episode here, which shows you how we did some hit scan aiming, which can be very useful for weapons that don't necessarily spawn a projectile, but rather just check if the cursor or the reticle is directly over the object they want to hit. Alright, so let's hop into it today. We're going to go into our base weapon BP. Now previously we had this logic here. This was in our event fire weapon in our blueprint. And what we did here was we got the transform of the socket called muzzle on our weapon, because each of our weapons should have a socket called muzzle on them. And then we determined what type of weapon it was to spawn the correct ammo. Now, I only had ever put in the assault rifle ammo because, quite frankly, I just didn't care. It was really just an aesthetic at that point. We didn't change anything about the ammo that was important. Like, we had the ability to change certain things about it, but we just didn't worry about it for now. So this is what we had in the past. And you can still use this if you want to use that directly from the muzzle logic right now. However, that's going to make your aim really inconsistent, and it's going to be based on your animations and all that stuff. Especially with someone who doesn't have full control over the animations, like if we're getting it from Mixamo, and I can't, make my own animation look exactly how I want it to. This is going to lead to some devastating results. You're not going to get those good, that perfect spot every single time. And sometimes you want that, especially if you're standing still, you're not really moving. You may want your accuracy to be pretty correct. We can open up, a window of where these can shoot, so there can be a little bit of variance in them. But that's specific to the projectiles themselves. The main thing is that we're actually firing and it's going to where we want. Any modifications for the specific projectile is completely normal. Like if we look at this example here, you can see that when shooting any weapon really, but when shooting with this weapon, the crosshairs are changing. and then the bullets are spreading out and going within that range. So that is something we can definitely cover, but not having that stuff yet, the main thing is we need to know exactly how to get our projectile to where we want it to go every single time. All right. And so we're going to use the event fire weapon that we had before, where we were setting our projectile or hit scan depending on the weapon type. We were doing different logic. Well, really, we're going to do basically the same thing that we did in the hit scan for the projectile as well now, but we are going to call a different function because it really is a different thing that's occurring here. Instead of just drawing a line, determining if it hit or not, what we are doing is we are spawning a projectile, but we're spawning it going a certain direction from a specific location. So, in event fire weapon, we go to the projectile type because that's what we're interested in today, and this is the new logic that we have in here. So I get the owner of the weapon, because the owner of the weapon is the one that's shooting it. So we get the owner, we cast it to our base character class. Once we get our base character class, we have to determine where we want to fire this from, whether it's an aim down sights camera, so we want to fire it from the aim down sights location, or the standard first person camera, which is the blind fire camera. Doesn't matter either way, we just need to know so that we spawn them from the correct spot, because it could change whether you're aiming down sights or not. And so the way you do this, once you have your character here, make sure you look at your actual components here. And you can see first person camera is the camera that's in my head. This is the standard camera that is on my character. That's my blind fire camera. When we aim down sights, we deactivate the first person camera. And we then go into our weapon BP and we use our ADS camera. Each weapon has their own ADS camera. Each weapon can aim down sights differently or will require a different location depending on, how large the weapon is or how small it is. And so we need to use the aim down sights camera as opposed to our actual character's camera. So that's where you get your two cameras from. And whether we're aim down sights or not determines which one we're going to use. We're going to make a new function by pressing the plus here. And I called it spawn projectile at crosshairs. So once you make this, you can go into it. And feel free to click on this and add this variable now. We're going to need the component, the camera component reference. That way we know exactly where we can spawn these items. So a simple way to do this is to add to the input parameter section, plus new parameter, change the type, search for camera component, if you could spell, unlike me, and click the object reference here. I called it camera component ref. And there's two things we want to know. We want to know the location of the camera and the rotation of the camera. We want to know both where the character is at, and where the camera is at, and what direction it's facing. So we drag off our camera component ref, get world location, and get world rotation. Both these right here. Then we are going to basically do the same logic that we did for the hit scan, but in terms of a projectile. So we need to spawn this at a point that is going to be relevant to the character. So we don't want to spawn it necessarily inside of the character. If it spawns inside the default location here from the camera, it's going to really spawn in the character's head. We don't necessarily want that. So there's a few things that we can do to make this look a little bit better. What we can do is actually add a little bit of a distance and basically move the projectile that distance. That way it's spawned out in the world as opposed to directly in our character's face. So let me show you what happens if you don't have this value in here. You can see how this bullet starts out very big. It's kind of hard to see because it is quick, but sometimes you'll see a little yellow flash in front of the character's face. It is a very quick projectile, but it's actually spawning directly from the camera, so it's actually a lot closer than you'd like to see it sometimes. But adding a small amount of distance like this makes it so that goes away. Now it's always spawning a little bit farther from the camera, and thus it always looks a little bit better. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to get our world location. You can leave this for now. We're going to get our world rotation, and we're going to drag off of this and type get forward vector right here. Now what it does, it's very simple. Rotate the world forward vector by the given rotation. That's what it says. And so really what this is the forward vector is the vector, or essentially the location or the direction that the camera is facing. So we're going to get that value, and we're going to multiply by float, vector times float, and multiplied by 20 across the board. Doing this will essentially put it 20 units, or 20 times ahead of where this value returns. So basically, if I make this bigger, if I make it like 200, you can see when I shoot, it's really small because it's spawning really far away from the camera. In fact, it's spawning so far away, you can almost not see the projectile at all, given how large it is. But you can see they still do hit the opponent. I like 20 as a value because I thought it looks good, but that it's entirely up to you. It could be different based on the weapon, could be different based on the speed that the weapon shoots the projectiles. And we're going to do a vector plus vector. So you can drag off of either of your vectors here, type a plus sign, vector plus vector, and you're going to add them together. You're going to get the location of this plus the location here from the forward vector, and you're going to mark that as the location. We're going to keep the world rotation and put that into rotation here. So you have your location and rotation being put into your transform. The way you get this node is you just type make transform. And then, like I said, you drag these in. This is really important because transform is what's used to spawn actors from class. They require a transform. By adding these variables and creating them or setting them to the values within this transform that we make, we can then return it into the spawn actor from class node, and it will spawn exactly where we want it to. You can leave the scale alone. I wouldn't really suggest changing the scale here for any reason, but then we do a switch on the weapon type. Remember, this function is within the base weapon BP. So if you just type weapon type, this determines quite literally what type of weapon it is. So we have assault rifle, pistol, and submachine gun in the game right now. So I just do a switch on weapon type. Then I spawn the correct actor, and it's that simple. Right now, I really only have 2 ammo types that work. I do technically have a 3rd ammo type, but I've never set it up to have projectile data or anything like that. So I use the assault rifle ammo twice, but really each type here should be a different type of ammo if there is one. Some games don't really even show you the bullets, you know, whether they use hit scan or not. Sometimes it's just kind of the muzzle flash and they just let it fly with streaks off of the object. But if you can see the bullets, like in this case, then you'll want to spawn an actor. And to do that, it's very simple. You just do spawn actor from class, pass in your transform from the make transform that we had, select your class, most likely one of your ammo types, so like assault rifle ammo, BP. And you don't really need the others. I would probably set the owner as well. However, we haven't covered anything where that was actually necessary yet. It will be necessary to track, you know, whose bullet did who damage to who. So it'll be very important down the line, but it's nothing that I've set up now. To do so, all you have to do is this. You can click the little down arrows on the spawn actor from class nodes, and you can just do this. You can do get owner, and you can set it as the owner here if you'd like. This will mean that the owner of the weapon is the owner of this bullet as well. But you could also set the owner of the bullet to this weapon. If you get a reference to self here, if I could type again, you can set that as the owner, and the owner will be the weapon. You can go about this either way for tracking, you know, what bullets belong to what players or what characters. So this is up to you. For now, I'm actually going to leave the owner of the bullet to the weapon. That way we know what weapon did it, and we'll get the owner of the weapon when we have to track what character was the one that was responsible for it. I have a few reasons for this, but again, it's nothing we really need to concern ourselves with now, but feel free to add that in. Okay, and once you do this, you have a basic set of logic here to actually make your projectiles spawn exactly where we want them from our first person point of view, where we can shoot them and it goes directly toward our crosshairs. Make sure in your event graph you don't forget to call this function now that we did in fact create it. So just call it, pass in your camera references, and you're good to go. Now make sure with this as well, if you are using your different ammo types now, just a reminder of how they should look, because we've only ever really set up the one. We have our base ammo BP, which doesn't have a specific mesh tied to it, because this is our parent class. This is really our wrapper class. We're not really ever going to spawn our base ammo BP class, which is there to store default values. Okay. So this is what it looks like. I've already gone over this. You shouldn't have to change anything. I'm just reminding you, because what I did do is we had set up the assault rifle ammo and we had added projectile movement, and we changed things in the projectile movement. And I showed that in the episode where we went over shooting the assault rifle ammo. However, we never actually went over the submachine gun ammo, and I have added that now just as an example to show you that you can change your ammo types now. So this is my submachine gun ammo. You can see I have changed the values in the projectile movement as well. We will be able to add all sorts of different things to these to make these weapons more unique and make the bullets have drop off and more recoil and things like that. But for now, getting our ammo and our projectiles shooting directly from the where the crosshairs are from the character's perspective is a huge win. Okay, once you have that, you should be able to shoot your projectiles normally and exactly where you want to see them. The only other thing that I want to cover today is actually just a bug fix from something that I didn't really consider before. So in our FPS tutorial character, when we go to fire, we had logic to make sure that the character was not reloading and they were still actively shooting before doing so, but we never actually stopped the character from sprinting. So you could technically be running and sprinting and firing at the same time. You don't really want to do that. You'll really notice it here because now with our new logic, the projectiles will still be coming out of the gun straight. I think it's fine for the fire button to cancel the sprint and then go directly into a shoot. I have no problem with that, but we do want to make sure that we do stop sprinting so we're not sprinting and running. I did put a comment here when running, if not intended to do so, because there are games where you can sprint and shoot at the same time. And if that's a mechanic of your game, that's fine. Just make sure that your logic is working as intended with this, because I left it out. So I've added that in now. Make sure that we stop sprinting if we go to shoot. One other thing we want to do here is, just based on this logic alone, the stop sprinting, in our stop sprinting function, what I was doing, if I could find it, right here, is I was setting the crosshairs visibility to be true, meaning we could see the crosshairs again. This is intended when we stop sprinting. However, if we're aimed down sights and we stop sprinting, because you can aim down sights and fire, and now we're calling stop sprinting from there. So if we call stop sprinting from the fire to ensure that we're not sprinting, we want to make sure that we don't enable the crosshairs visibility again. So a simple if check, if not aim down sights, before doing this logic that we made in the previous episode, will solve it. So now if we play our game, you can see that we can fire, we can aim down sights, and we can actually shoot. Now, see how it shoots from the center of the screen? That means I'll probably want to move my aim down sights camera down, because now it looks off. It doesn't really look off when you're in your blind fire here, but now it looks off here. The bullet is not coming out anywhere near the muzzle. So I'd highly recommend just updating it to make sure that all your weapons look good here. So I can go to my base weapon BP. I can go to my aim down sights camera, and I can actually move it down. Now when I aim down sights, you can see it's higher up. Now this specific case, it still doesn't really look good. So we may want to move it around. Something like this is probably perfect. So, you know, in this case, the weapon mesh is blocking where we can see, but in theory, we would either have this part of our gun would either be a sight, or we would have some other way to aim down sight, such as just zooming in over the weapon. We wouldn't want it to block the screen. So a better example will be our submachine gun. You can see that it has iron sights on it that are easy to read, and you can see that it is shooting just simply too high. So if I can save this now. If I go into my submachine gun, I can go to the mesh on that guy, and the camera can be moved down yet again. And now if we do it on this weapon, you'll see it's higher up. Now the view isn't necessarily right, but that's a little bit closer. So I'd recommend maybe bring it up a little tiny bit. See if we can get it. We may have to add some rotation as well, but something like that does the basic job. But yeah, I'm not entirely happy with. Let's see if we can actually rotate this guy just a little bit. Every change could have a pretty massive impact here when we're looking at our aim down sights. There you go. So something like that. That's pretty close. You can see there's a little bit of angle now. So I hold this, and it's actually pretty close to where it should be firing. You can still change it more if you'd like. Add some more rotation. You don't want to add too much. You don't want it to look weird, but you want it to look just the right amount. When you zoom in here, there you go. Look. See, that might actually be even too much because I think they're going a little bit under where the iron sights are. But there you go. So now you can play around with it and have much more accurate aiming while you're doing this. And it'll alleviate any headaches down the road for when we're adding different variations to our bullet patterns. We don't want to have any other things affecting them. It's going to be confusing enough with just trying to get the patterns right and the recoil right. So we don't want to have to deal with all these other issues. Anyway, guys, that's all I got for you today, so I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do, and I just really appreciate it. I'm going to give a huge, huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon supporters and subscribers. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support that you've given. I really, really appreciate it, and it means the world to me. It helps me keep working on these videos and be excited every time to put out new ones for you guys, so thank you so much. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I'd be happy to help you out and assist you with any problems that you had. It's completely free. And like I said, guys, that's all I got. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one, guys.